I'm thinking about Salim's question, and I'm thinking about like this maybe so this reality, right, that there's a genocide happening and that we are witnessing an incredible amount of suffering that is like at the cosmic scale, and that this is a very historical, it goes, it's a deeply historical, like it goes way back, is what I'm saying, generational. And it's acute at this time and has been acute for many, many years. And I think that for many of us in the diaspora, there is there let me see if I can articulate it. I'm drawn to this. I think there's something going on with like this idea of collective trauma and generational trauma and then individual trauma, right? And what you have been offering us, I think it might be easy to say, oh, well, this is just, I mean, of talking about individual trauma, but who cares about my individual trauma because there is this genocide happening, right? But I, what I think is really important, what I'm hearing, and this will come to a question, is I feel like there's as activists who are trying to make some type of difference, whether it's a drop in the bucket or a big collective, action. Um, we need to have compassion for ourselves, just as the story of the Good Samaritan, just as all the things we were talking about. In order to be able to function, in order to be able to serve. So that's one takeaway for those of us here who are, really want to do something. The other is this compassion for the other, as Nicole, you were just talking about, and Eleni from Matt's question, and even the people who are talking about their coffee, like how do we find that compassion for those people? Of course, also that extends to the compassion for the people who are doing harm, which is one of the biggest challenges of our lives. But the other question that I think maybe gets to the anger point, Nicole, that I've been thinking about is like, and to some of the questions in the chat, is this idea of like, how do we invoke compassion about this issue? I don't know if you can answer this question, but just to say it's a question, like, how do we invoke compassion the way you're talking about it in others who seem to be in my opinion deluded because of the media campaign, because of the over over saturation, because nobody has that clear narrative, which brings me, which I think is really important that you said, Nicole, like following a narrative, following a story, because otherwise it's this fragmented reality. And people out there in the world who aren't close to home, who aren't living in the diaspora, who for whom this isn't close to home, can just go to the coffee shop and have their coffee and be like, oh yeah, shoot, that sucks. I mean, it's just so awful, But it's like, meanwhile, we're like, no, no, it's way more than just awful. And so, how do we invoke compassion in others to feel that depth of pain that is happening in the world, to join the movement? So I think that's one of our challenges. Um, and it's like twofold, because it's the vicarious trauma we're living with as diasporic people, as well as like the trauma of witnessing people who are not who in whom we are not able to invoke compassion. Does this make sense at all?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a few short thoughts, and then
Okay.
can I go first, Eleni, and then you can,
Mhm.
because I know you probably have a lot to say about the generational
Yeah,
piece. But
I had some thoughts on that, but yeah, yeah.
yeah. So about to the point about in I'm not sure what you mean by invoking trauma, but so I'm going to use my words, but like
Oh,
awakening
invoking
or
compassion. Sorry.
invoking compassion,
Invoking compassion, yeah.
awakening awakening compassion. You know, one thing that I think, unfortunately, if mainstream media is your main source of information about these these atrocities, um, and you're not taking care of yourself while consuming these or being an intentional, consumer of these things, that it's almost immediate overwhelm. And when people are consuming information and feel paralysis and pointlessness and powerlessness, one way that can manifest is apathy, because the cost of caring is too great in a world where that has no that has no constructive place to go. And one way that I think that we can awaken compassion, or that's worth thinking about, is always when we are talking about these sorts of things to point towards hope. And I don't mean that to sound um, like we're minimizing the depth of what's happening. It's because when people feel there's a reason to hope, or they can more clearly see how their actions might factor into working towards that hope, and then they are more likely to feel safe enough to act or safe enough to care. Um, so it may look like apathy on the surface, but for a whole host of issues in the world right now, I suspect that for a lot of people, that apathy is just masking a really deep sense of powerlessness. So that is something that stood out to me as you were talking. And then the other thing is um, to face the reality that maybe sometimes you can't. We can't force people to care. That would not be care. We can't force people to love. That would not be love. One of the most powerful things I think that you can do, people in a group like this, is to simply model what it looks like to be people who genuinely care. Not hit people over the head with the fact that they should care more, but for yourself to model that. That is such a contagious thing. Oh my gosh, this person cares. And that's what it looks like to care. And maybe they're not changing the world because they can't, but like maybe it's okay for me to care just a little bit more. Maybe it's okay for me to feel just a little bit of pain because this person is, and they're surviving, and no one's asking me to give up my life here. Just inviting me to care. And I see now how that's done, and I want to follow in those footsteps. So those are two thoughts that came to me, and I'll hand it over to you, Eleni.
It stuck out to me when you talked about intergenerational trauma, Anna, and those of us who are part of any kind of significant diaspora, especially from Palestine and the Middle East, but from other diaspora communities. How can I say this? So like part of my family's history is that my mom was uprooted from her village in Greece when she was 3 because of the civil war there. And so my grandmother lost her dad and 2 brothers as a result of that because they were clergy. And so this was a conflict between communists, and similar stuff was happening across of all of Eastern Europe. And so, and then the village was razed. There was nothing. If you go there now, there's nothing. Um, when you are a diaspora kid, I use the term kid loosely, but when you grow up and you have those stories in your family, you know that there's no way you can repay them for what they suffered for you. And I think a place that I got to personally around that, um, and I'll share with you guys, this is a bit, maybe a little bit too personal, but I had a very meaningful dream of my grandmother many years after she had died. And she basically said to me that she was happy that I was safe and that I wasn't suffering in my life. And that's what she wanted from me. And I think we need to know also that even for those who are still alive, not just the previous generation, Not just people who have left this life, but for those who do love us and care about us, they are happy to see us do well. It's really, really hard for us to accept that happiness, and that safety. And I think that's also coming back to that place of being able to stand in compassion and empathy, knowing that we have a different situation from them. And that does require a lot of humility because, yeah, how are we ever going to make that up to them? We can't. We just can't. Um, we have to have humility to actually accept our current safety as a gift, I think, that's all I can say about that.
That's beautiful. And I love that you kind of Nicole, the point about hope, I feel like is and modeling care and maybe modeling hope and recognize and that can be, I mean, that is contagious and that will hopefully encourage others and uplift others to join the movement. Um, so I guess on that, I'll just say thank you. And Matt, did you want to have any closing comments?
I wanted to say really quickly before you say that, Matt, someone asked, what's your opening line to invite the conversation on Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, whether it be at work or at church? My line would be, there's a wonderful talk series by an organization called Orthodox Christians for Palestine. You might be interested. And then telling them
Yeah.
about some of the upcoming speakers, because there's some really lovely ones. And this is such an edifying group and series. So we're really, really happy to be a part of it.